So you'll
Now?
just hit, see right now it's muted.
Okay.
You hit unmute, I'll ask the question, the speaker's in the ceiling, and then everybody will be able to hear it.
Okay, perfect.
You guys are live right now, so you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you guys all hear us? Yeah, can Zoom hear us? Yes, they can. Okay. So, my name is Brielle Batch, and I'll be presenting with Steph Clampitt today. We are representing IU Indy and IU Bloomington today. We are presenting on strategies for reducing bad actors in REDCap surveys. So we want to start off by going over some of the benefits of using REDCap surveys. So they're low cost, as we learned in our keynote speech. They are free for all of us to use. So that really helps us because as researchers, we have limited funding, or as like professionals in general. Since they're lower cost, you're not sending out paper surveys, you can get a larger sample size for that same cost. And then on top of that, REDCap is a pretty user-friendly platform. Anyone can complete a REDCap survey. It doesn't matter whether they have a REDCap account or not. As long as they receive a link or QR code, they can complete that survey. Today, we are not going to be talking about how to make the surveys themselves. So if you guys do want to learn about that, Alexander has a session this afternoon called Surveys in REDCap. But as a reminder, this will be recorded. Our slides will be posted. So if you have questions, you don't know how to use the survey yet, you learn this afternoon, you can go back to it later on. So what are some disadvantages of using web surveys? As we know, web surveys are a great way to get more people. But because you have more people and because of our good old friend generative AI, there's a lot more prevalence of bad actors and bots taking surveys. So those are automated computerized programs that search the internet and take surveys, or bad actors. So those are people that are taking your survey, typically because you offer an incentive or because they want to fill the ballot box. So they want to inflate your results to reflect what they want it to be. So today we're going to go over our strategies between the two departments that we have, and how we complete and create REDCap surveys, like what we do to reduce and identify bad actors and bots.
So first, we're going to talk about what we think is one of the best ways, which is if you're able to get a sample file. So first, what is a sample file? So obviously, when you're conducting a survey, you have a group of people, your population that you're trying to survey. And sometimes you can get a random sample of those, which is statistically very good, or you can get a census of everyone. But either way, you want a file that has everyone who's taking part of the survey with some kind of identifier, and then how you're going to get it to them. So in the case of a web survey, it's most likely their email address. The benefits of this sample file is you can make sure to send everyone an individual link and make sure that they can only take that link once. So and most people, if they get a link, they're going to take it first and then they're going to try and send it off. So when they send it off, it's not going to work again. You can also track responses if you're able to know who's doing it. And as a researcher, you're able to keep track of them and you don't have to have it be anonymous. You can make sure they're doing it. And then you can do individualized follow-up afterwards. And this will also decrease bots because you're not just putting a link online and leaving it open to everyone. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to create those individual survey links. There are two ways of doing it. One is the more standard way, which is the participant list, and one is a way that we at the Center for Survey Research do it. For a bunch of reasons, it's a little more complicated, but it's a lot more fun. So using a participant list. For this, you can, again, send a link to every single person. You can track who has done it, and you can send emails directly from REDCap, so you don't even have to export the links. Everything can stay in REDCap. So how you would do that? You already have your survey programmed. You can go to Survey Distribution Tools, and then click the Participant List tab, and then from there you can add participants, and you can also compose your survey invitation right there, and that will put the link directly in there. Now, you can also put you can enable a participant identifier if you want a way to track them. If you don't want a way to track them, don't enable that. So now if you want to do it the more complicated way, you can use what's called a smart variable. So the reason we do this at the center is because we send out a lot of emails. So by Google's requirements, we are a bulk sender. So in order to meet all of Google and Yahoo and now Microsoft's requirements, we have to have one-click unsubscribe in our header. We have to meet DMARC, DKIM, and SPF. We have to track unsubscribes, all of that stuff. So we have our own email software that does that. So we will actually use a smart variable to create the link to put that into our own email and send it off. If anyone knows how to put an unsubscribe link in REDCap, let me know. I would love to know that, but I have not figured it out. And oh, we can also choose the throttle, which is something I would love if we know how to do, because if we're sending out 10,000 emails, if you blast that to one person's email account, you're going to get blocked. There's no way it's going to get through. So we set it up so that it goes very slowly over the day. So how you do this? You can just create a text box, and we always just call it something like link. And then you're going to use a calc text field because it's words, since it's a link. And then survey URL is telling it to create the URL. :form1 is just what I named the standard survey we're doing, but that will be whatever your survey is. And then we hide this so that, because it has to live in the instrument. So like if they log on, they don't just see this random link that they try and click. It's going to be hidden for everyone.
So then our next option, if you don't have a sample file, we ask, can you do an eligibility survey? So if you can do an eligibility survey, that's what we suggest doing next. So what is an eligibility survey? An eligibility survey is a preliminary survey that asks your respondents to answer questions that relate to the main survey instrument's eligibility criteria or inclusion criteria. So those are any factors or attributes that a respondent needs to have to participate in your main survey. And then within that eligibility survey, you ask your respondents their contact information so that if they are eligible, you can follow up with them with the appropriate survey link. And that just kind of prevents a bunch of spam from coming into that main survey instrument. It makes it easier to clean later on. So again, some of those benefits. You can screen the respondents for the desired inclusion criteria. It prevents people from having access to the main survey unless you know that they are eligible for that survey. And then since you are screening individually, you make sure that you have the audience that you're looking for. Another thing that you can do with an eligibility survey is a security question. So this is a question that the respondents must answer correctly in the eligibility survey and at a second time point. So they'll complete the eligibility survey. The question could be something like, what is your date of birth or what is your favorite color? A caveat though, if you are asking questions like date of birth, you need to make sure that it's been approved by your regulatory body. As a researcher, like we do human subjects research with my department, so that's our IRB. So that's just the only caveat with that. So you'll ask them that question, they answer it, and then when you recontact them, that's going to be when you verify that. So some benefits of using security questions. So bots and bad actors struggle to answer security questions correctly and consistently. And then it provides an additional level of security when paired with those eligibility surveys that I was talking about. So this is just the kind of the instructions for you guys to reference later on to kind of use these. So you include the security question within the eligibility survey. After they complete that survey, you want to contact them either via email or phone, whichever method you used, you collected that information on in that survey. We recommend contacting them like at least a business day later. You want to have some sort of time frame between that. So just think about if you're making up an answer, you're going to remember it 5 minutes later, but you might not remember it a day later. So then when you recontact them, you're going to discuss, be like, hey, we got your eligibility survey. I just need you to confirm like this question. And then you'll re-ask the question. If they answer the question correctly, then that might be something that they can continue to receive like the actual main survey instrument or the interview, whatever that sort of process is. If they don't answer the question correctly, that's your perfect point to be like, thanks for your interest, but like you're not eligible to participate. So if you can't do an eligibility survey, our next option is to use a mix of different bot detection strategies. So our first bot detection strategy is using security questions without an eligibility survey. So this would be a security question within that single survey. So you ask a question specific to the population of interest. So if we were doing a survey on dining options at IU Indianapolis, we only want individuals who are affiliated with IU Indianapolis to complete that survey, staff, students, faculty. So we would ask them something, what is your college email address? Or what is your institution email address? And then you'll review those answers. And I can promise you, if you have your bots and bad actors, they're going to be putting their Gmail in. You ask for their IU address, they're still putting their Gmail. So then that way, only people that provide a valid IU email address can can receive your incentive. You'll know anyone who doesn't include in like a legitimate IU email address, you can remove that data from the entry and you don't have to send them like whatever incentive you were providing because they weren't a legitimate survey respondent. So our next feature is the RECAPTCHA feature. So this is a free tool used to screen bots from online surveys. In REDCap, it looks like the one on the screen. There are other RECAPTCHA features. I'm sure you guys have seen like the puzzle piece where you have to like identify like the animals, letters combinations, sums. Right now, this is all that there is in REDCap, but it is nice because it does offer that layer of protection. So to turn on RECAPTCHA, after you have your survey developed, you go to that same data collection and survey distribution tools. You're going to make sure that you are on that public survey link tab. And then under your public survey URL, there's just going to be this little checkbox that says protect the public survey using the Google RECAPTCHA feature. And all you have to do is just select the check mark and then it's on.
So now we're in charge. Now we're going to talk about data cleaning. So no matter what you do, how you decide to try and keep bots and bad actors out, a few are probably going to slip through. But either way, these are just good resources. If you do it perfectly, you're still going to have probably some people who take your survey who aren't that engaged, and you're going to want them out of there. So these can just be general data cleaning as well.
So our first one is a little bit complicated. It is IP recording. So IP recording is an automated system that records the unique numerical ID respondents used to complete a survey. So once again, using IP recording is personal information. So your IP address is associated with your specific internet, like your Wi-Fi, your specific location. So it is hard to track people down individually, but it is possible. So we highly recommend going through your regulatory body, making sure that it's okay to collect that information. So there is a benefit. It does help identify respondents who complete the survey more than once. However, to my knowledge, you have to review your IP addresses individually and then compare them against each other. So you're going to be able to easily tell if they complete the survey back to back. But say if they complete it at 12 and then they come back at 2 p.m., you might miss that unless you extract the data to kind of like run a variable to look for repeating numbers. But to turn it on, you're going to go to your project home and design. You click on the designer. You go to online designer, and then you're going to turn on your e-consent and PDF snapshots because we need a PDF enabled. So within that, you're going to select your main survey, and then you hit step 2 here, save as compact PDF, and then step 3, save to file repository. Again, these slides will be up posted, so don't worry about memorizing it. You go back to designer, you're going to create a new instrument from scratch and add instrument here. I usually just call this like IP address or like IP recording. Then you email redcap@iu.edu because this is like a way to track all of your respondents. So it needs to be controlled by our administrators. You provide your instrument name and then the name of the new instrument you named. So I call it IP recording. And then you just request that they enable the IP address recording. And then they'll notify you when that's turned on.
I'll also just take a brief break to say that I present here. This is my second year presenting, and I do it to one, share information, but also to make pleas to the REDCap admins that I would love a CAS login system if we can do that, because that would be a way for you to set it up so that only people with IU could get in there. Back to the presentation. Using quotas, this is not a direct way to keep bots out. However, this is a good way if you think you're going to get bots to be alerted of it very quickly. So we had a survey on we were doing with a department on campus, and they were putting a map in there, and you get charged for using that after so many. And we were very afraid they were going to get bots because there was an incentive involved. So we set up a quota of 10,000 because we were like, 10,000 people are not going to take this survey. And so if you hit 10,000, you know you have a bot problem. And then you can stop distributing it, figure out a new way to deal with them, and then re-put it in. So this is just something to keep in mind if you really think bots are going to be a problem. And I would set your threshold pretty high, but high enough that you are going to be alerted of it quickly. So how you would do that, you can go to your survey settings, and then you can set the quota, and you can put in the number for whatever you want your quota to be for this survey. So then overall response quality. So like I was saying before, this is just a way for us to try and get bots, bad actors, and just unengaged people out of your survey. And it's going to work for everything you're doing, whether you think you have a very good cleaning file or you think you had a lot of bad bots and bad actors in there. So first, I'm just going to go over some general survey methodology cleaning. So the first is straight lining. This is when someone goes in and they just are answering the same thing. So you can see my great survey I made, ABCD, and I just hit strongly agree for everything. This also works for multiple choice questions. If they're just going through and hitting the first choice or the last choice for every time, they're probably not that engaged, and that's something to look for. Along with that, if they are a straight liner, they're probably also speeding through this thing. So if your average and median, you have those numbers and they are a complete outlier, I would think about getting rid of them, especially if you have that with the straight lining that we talked about. So then I have here how to actually set up timers in REDCap. Another thing you can do is have like a start and an end timer. So you can hide the start timer at the beginning of the survey so that they don't even know it's there. And then you'll have automatically the time they submit the last page, and you can subtract that. This is just a way so you don't have to do any math. It will just calculate it for you. Inconsistent answers. So I think a lot of times when you're doing a survey, you have questions that are kind of getting at the same thing. So if they're answering one way and then later down the line answering it differently, they're probably not reading it. They're just answering however they feel. So that's something you can look for. So we'll see this a lot of times if someone says like, oh, I'm 18 years old and I have a PhD. They probably don't. So I would think about, getting rid of them. These are just other strategies we have heard or that we are looking into. So one is a trap question, which is at the first part of the survey, you could ask their date of birth and then later ask them how old they are. Those should obviously match up. If they don't, something's wrong. You can also put a very compelling open-ended question at the end. And we're not talking like, tell us anything you think, or like, do you have any other thoughts? Like, you really have to think about what you're trying to study and what would get people to stop and interact with you. And if they're giving you like a very quality response, they were very engaged in your survey, and that's something you want to keep. So the two of us went to a panel the other day hosted by the University of Waterloo about this subject, and something they brought up a lot was having a honeypot question, which is they are just putting a question in there with white text so that if you're a human taking it, you can't read it. But if you're a bot taking it, it will see that and answer the question. So if you get an answer there, you know they're a bot. I will say, I do not know how this is going to work with screen readers. So that is something from an accessibility standpoint I would be careful of, because you don't want to get a whole population out of your survey just because they're using a screen reader. So then we just wanted to go over our general strategy again. So best, you get a sampling. Great, you have just solved so many of your own problems. If you can't and you can do an eligibility survey, that's a great next step. If you can't do any of that, you're really going to have to look at what you're studying, who you are trying to study, and like the resources you have, and use a mix of strategies. And then no matter what you do, you got to clean the data at the end of the day. And I will say too, this is not like that cut and dry as we're making it out to be. So even if you have a sample file, you're probably going to want to do some other bot strategies as well. So you're really going to want to think about like what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. And that being said, like I said, I work for the Center for Survey Research, and our job is to help researchers with their projects. So you can scan that QR code to contact us. Also come talk to me this whole day. If you have any questions about this, we would love to work with you. This is what we do. We have methodologists and programmers on staff who can totally help you figure out the best way to handle this for your project. And that's all we have. Yes.
Tell me about documentation of your methodology when that data. We're doing that. We're going to need some guidelines, what we're going to cut out.
Yeah.
Latin, or text boxes. Yes. 80% of our surveys, we have 100 surveys.
Yes.
And it's very obvious to us that
Mhm.
we were doing all that, and we kind of what our method was. But the right way to document that in a publication or an analysis, should we be documenting that we found some data?
Yes, so I think you definitely want to go over your methodology because there's not one standard one. If there was one standard one, then also everyone with bots and batters could get around it.
We'll
So
figure
it's,
it out.
yeah, it's really based on what you're doing, but you definitely want to be open about what you're doing, and the way you're describing it to me makes sense of like, yeah, you have the stream out there and you can't get through, like, you're really focused on it, like 30-minute survey in class. That's not the thing. And if you see someone putting line, there's probably really small slide. So, you know, like, I think that's also a good
It
one.
went along with other things like the short survey
Yeah.
time. We thought that was fair.
Mhm. Did you have an incentive? Okay, I will say, I don't know if we made this clear. This is a much bigger problem if you are giving out an incentive. If you aren't giving out an incentive, you could still encounter this, but if you have an incentive, I would be very worried about that.
About the incentive. How does a bot find us?
So recently we learned in our,
Repeat questions for the people on Zoom, or have microphones for the asking questions.
There's a room microphone. but it is.
Sorry. This is much better technology. I'm so-
okay, so the question was,
How do bots identify a survey?
yeah, so how do bots identify an incentivized survey? Typically, there'll be like any language that it's compensation, gift card, a dollar sign. Anything that's in there, chat GPT can pick up, because we learned in our roundtable discussion is people will just type in, find me easy ways to make money. And like the top one will be those surveys. They'll take the surveys for you and then they give you the links for the e-gift. So definitely don't include an amount. You can say something like compensation is included, or if you can do something like an eligibility survey, once they are eligible, then you can go over like, okay, like eligible for the survey. This is what like participation is going to entail. This is what the main survey is. After you complete it, you'll receive this. But it is hard because on the one hand, you want to tell people you're going to give them an incentive because it's going to help anyone, regardless of bots and bad actors or just the population you want to survey. But especially if you list a number high, that you're going to have those. So I'd recommend just saying compensation provided, specifying how much until like.
We also, if we are doing a personal link, we'll put a note that it's a personal link. And that stops a little bit, people just trying to send the links out there. And then also if people come to you and they go, the link's not working, then you can be like, this is supposed to be, we're like, don't send this around, it's already done, it's perfect. That helps a little bit. Okay, the question was, for the open-ended text I was talking about and having like a nice one where they can. Okay, I'll talk really fast, where they can fill it out, they're having generative AI fill it out. I have not seen that personally, but I will also say, we use a lot of personal links. I don't know.
Seen it once with a qualitative interview, where their answers just line up a little bit too well. Like we do research with like substance use and they were like using all of like the keyword, specific treatment methods and medication. Chances are like you're. So it's just kind of a judgment call. And then like we talked about earlier, writing down that methodology, especially if you're trying to publish or you need to talk with Funder about how you did things. Like this is how we remove that. Because you can always re-clean, you can always go back. That all those responses will be. It's unfortunately just try your best. But thank you.